Sowore. Your turn, sir. 3 minutes. Some key issues that you see on the horizon as you interrogate the elections landscape in Africa over the next two years.
Thank you, and good morning to everybody. I just want to tell you that Nigeria just dodged a bullet. This process was such that all the bookmakers about Nigeria were proven wrong. I mean, policy wonks, traditional rulers, even our country, militia leaders, prophets, academic experts, and even the legacy media was found wanting when it mattered most. But this did not happen by accident. There had been a very, very powerful and determined effort by Nigerian people, especially 40% of its population, young people, deploying technology, social media in particular, to bring about the kind of very silent revolution that you just saw happen in Nigeria a few weeks ago. You see, we love to give credit to all of our partners internationally, but Nigeria has missed it for too long. We've been a disappointment to the African continent. Nigeria has been such a big disappointment that we used to refer to ourselves as BBC, big blind country. But now, we feel like we're a giant in the sun once again because we have been able to conduct a simple thing, and that's an election. But let me tell you that this did not happen by accident. People worked very hard. And I was in one of the departments that made it possible. That's the social media department that I mentioned before, where we mobilized severally along all kinds of lines using technology. Nigeria has over 100 million cell phones available to it. And if you know us Nigerians, we love our technology real good. So there are a lot of cell phones and smartphones on the continent, and we just ask people to turn to it and use it to guard their democratic rights jealously. And they did. So what we did as Sahara reporters was to mobilize people to become citizen reporters, reporting the elections as they're happening instantaneously. And we were reporting the numbers and reporting the nuances and the conduct of our people to the world as it was happening, to show that we can take darkness out of elections. Because what happens in Nigeria, and Nigeria's biggest problem, is what happens between the voting units and the collation centers. Usually, just those 30 minutes between which they move the ballot papers and boxes from where the voting took place to where the counting is done. That is where the darkness is. And we also have to take the darkness out of our leaders. You know, you have heard that President Jonathan considered the election beautiful, but he had no option because he had a country that was willing to see him out of the door peacefully. And if he didn't want it, he knew that he had to face the Burkina Faso example. And that is very important for African leaders. It's very important for African leaders and the ambassadors who are sitting with us today, that Africans are yearning for change. And I call on our friends in Angola, in Cameroon, that Africans want change. We're calling our friends in Togo, that Africans want peaceful elections. And if you don't give them peaceful election, you have chosen the other alternative. And that's the old Dagadugu or the Burkina Faso example. So I just want to tell you people that we have done it, and I'm proud to be Nigerian today, and I hope we'll continue to be proud because there's still a lot of work to be done to hold our politicians accountable, to allow for transparency. We are not just going to allow Buhari and his friends, having won, to sit there and tell us that another 4 years is not enough to make changes. We are going to see that that change happens, and we promise that we'll continue to do the best we can. And we hope our friends around Africa can borrow the kind of templates we had in Nigeria in monitoring this, that made it possible for us to call the winner of the election 12 hours before anybody else could do it with social media. Thank you very much for bringing us.
We understand Nigeria's role on the continent. We understand Nigeria's place in West Africa. We understand Nigeria's role on the across Africa. And so it was a huge relief, but also a moment of pride, not just for Nigerians, but for the continent as we watched the elections unfold in Nigeria, because we understood the implications of Nigeria's elections well beyond its borders. My question to each of you would be this: as we look across the continent at upcoming elections, what are the two key lessons learned that countries in upcoming elections can take from Nigeria's last experience?
One of it is external, and the second is internal. And we've spoken a lot about our international partners, and I mean Western countries in particular, to which African leaders listen to. It is very important that they are very clear and unambiguous about their expectations of elections. And one of the problems we've had in the past is that sometimes even our partners from here in the US speaks from both sides of their mouth. On elections in Africa, in some places they accept elections that are not on par with international standards, their own standards. And in some places they condemn elections that may even be fairer. So we must have one single unambiguous standard for all African elections and African leaders. And I want to use this opportunity to quickly talk about one of our friends who is practicing free media in Angola, Rafael Marques, who is facing trial for doing the same kind of work that I did in Nigeria that delivered this kind of election that we are proudly talking about today. He's going to be facing trial for all sorts of criminal charges by the Angolan ruling elite. We must support him. And internally, it's important that people take ownership not only of the process but of the narrative. One of the things that used to happen before we mobilized new media in Nigeria is that everybody waited for CNN to even call our own elections. Now we do it ourselves. Now we do it with pride, and we report, and we are not afraid to report good and bad about Nigeria, because it's a country that is half the population of the United States of America. So it's a big country. So we must take full ownership, and we should not regret when we do so, and we should be proud of it. So that's the internal and this external advice that I have for taking ownership.
I think my next question would have to be with, has to do with some of the more problematic situations in a number of countries with upcoming elections. And my question to you is, as you look ahead to 2015 and 2016, which two elections do you see as being the most difficult or the most controversial, and why?
I'm more interested in places where elections don't take place, and we call them elections. In Togo, which is happening this weekend, is a place that I'm really concerned about. It's going to be a non-election that we are going to refer to, unfortunately, as an election. I also would like to go far as Cameroon sometimes, where I heard the next election is 2018. And there hasn't been an election, and I don't think there are elections where leaders just don't change. You know, when you have the same guy being contesting and being voted for in elections that they tightly control. And I know the ambassadors of this country will not be happy with me. Those places need real elections. Yeah. And I think Guinea, as you mentioned, is going to be an interesting one, because apparently they are manipulating the constitution once again.
My name is Jenab Bilibali. I am the ambassador of Mali. I want to thank Professor Mukarabibas for inviting me. I rather have a comment. My comment is that in my country, the first democratic election happened in 1992. And from 1992 to 2002, my country has had very, very deep democracy and very, very important economic development because of democracy. And the world, the West, has helped us very, very much in effecting democracy. In 2012, a coup occurred in my country. And the world, well, has abandoned us on the economic basis anyway. But then the world again helped us very much by refusing to let the militaries who did the coup run the country. So transitional government was on and has organized elections, and well, from the swearing in of the new president, things are again going better. But then, while we have to thank the world and the West to help us have democracy, the appeal I want to make is that the election is not all of it. Because you see, after the election, after Mr. Ibrahim Baraketa has been elected and so on, we don't have peace in Mali. Okay? Because people have decided, Malians have decided to attack the central government. The world has helped us keep them away, but today we have terrorism in the 2/3 of the country, so there is no security. If you don't have security, you don't have investment. If you don't have investment, you don't have economic development, you don't have improvement of people's life. What my appeal is that, we are grateful to the world to help us have democracy, but we would like the world to continue to assist us have the democracy, have solid roots. That is my comment. Thank you again. Thank you.
I'll just take very quick 2 questions and to refer to my ambassador friend. I hear this all the time about African leaders claiming that they need more time to perfect democracy. It's a little bit annoying because African leaders never have a problem with Western tastes. They love Western jets, Western wine. When they want to buy houses, they want to buy houses in Western capitals. But when it comes to democracy, it's a problem. It needs to grow, it needs to take time. But they don't take time when they have to lose their president. They don't have a problem opening accounts in foreign countries. But when it's time for democracy, we need more time. We need more time. Cameroon and Nigeria are brothers, and that's why I'm concerned about Cameroon, because the same way Boko Haram is ravaging Nigeria, is ravaging northern Cameroon. So if it goes well for Nigeria, we hope it will go well for Cameroon. And that will lead me to the question of Uganda and Rwanda. These are countries where people need change. In the case of Rwanda, I was there last year. It's just one-party rule. You can't find a dissenting opinion on the streets of Rwanda. That's how bad it is. Well, there's economic development and growth, but people need freedom, they need choice. And my appeal once again to the African leaders who are sit-tight, let my people go. That's it, it's as simple as that. Let them choose whoever person they want to lead them. And that's the essence of democracy. Yes, I'm just going to have a quick response on the issue of GMOs in Africa, and this is where leadership becomes very important on the continent of Africa. Africa can feed itself very well without fake and adulterated food, and when we have the right kind of leadership in various African countries, GMOs will become a thing of the past, and I think this is where Africa needs to keep pushing. And I'll just quickly also jump into the issue of voting, diaspora voting. Even though I'm a very good supporter of diaspora voting, it's very symbolic, to be honest with you. What I saw happen in Nigeria this time is that people actually went back home, not only to vote, but to ensure that the votes there count. So you can have diaspora voting, but so many of you can't even get your passport from many of African embassies. How can they safeguard your votes if you vote from here? Just when you're ready at the elections in your country, just buy a plane ticket and go back home and ensure that you're there watching over your votes and the votes of your brothers, sisters, and your families. That's my advice. But for those who love the idea, I wish you good luck.
Hi, my name is Hayatu Mohammed Yuba. I am a nurse here in DC. And my father comes from Nigeria and my mother from Cameroon. I heard what the ambassador was saying here. Unfortunately, he has left. I would like to know why in Nigeria we have had about 15 to 20 governments, and Cameroon since independence only 2. Why? Are there no people in Cameroon who can also become leaders? So while I praise Sahara reporters, Omoyele, Sowore for doing a way. In fact, I just came from Nigeria. I went to vote. So why is it that Cameroon Nigeria can be changing government and Cameroon won't? Dr. Chris Komonyo, you should help us to do what Sahara reporters did by making sure that there are media who can also be reporting elections in Cameroon to change the government. Thank you.
Well, I want to thank everybody for taking our time to patiently wait here today to listen to us. A lot of good questions, and my heart goes out to the people of Gambia. Somebody talked about Ethiopia. The reason why nobody's talking about Ethiopian election is because there's not going to be election in Ethiopia. Everybody knows that. But what is more important is that Ethiopia, Rwanda, and Uganda is one of those African countries where the United States double-speak has come out to be very, very unfortunate, because these are some of the coziest leaders to Washington. But again, it's very important that, and I can say this categorically, that you adopt the Nigerian model of living in the diaspora, not just complaining at conferences and seminars. Do something about your country. I started 9 years ago. We started this media in my basement in New Jersey. Now I have an office in New York City. And with that, we were able to effect change in Nigeria. That media became very, very powerful and popular. You should stop sending Western Union alone back home. You should use your money. The greatest inflow of foreign investment to Africa comes from Africans in the diaspora today. It is more than what USAID is spending on Africa. It's more than any of the foreign investment that you can think about. So you should mobilize around the resources you are sending back home. Influence your family members and ensure that you change governments that you do not want. You have the right to do that, and nobody should be afraid to engineer a revolution where it is necessary, because social media has been able to deliver to Africa about 3 revolutions. In Tunisia, it happened in Egypt, it happened in Burkina Faso, and we just had a revolution in Nigeria. Not time to be too enthusiastic already. Let me be very, very clear about that. It's not yet time to shout Uhuru on Nigeria. And you know what happens when people engineer revolutions and they go back to sleep. What you're seeing in Egypt will happen to you. You know, there are people who are there to reverse the progress in a second. So once again, I want to thank Congresswoman Karen Bass for making this possible. I do not get to sit on this kind of panel. There used to be an election monitor panel, you know. All of the guys who went to Africa, they're going to see the election and say if they disagree or not. Now we get to sit to talk about our future.
Congresswoman Bass couldn't be here to close us out, but she did want me to make one announcement on her behalf. First of all, thank you all for coming on behalf of our office. And she wanted to make sure that everyone knew that a clean AGOA has passed the year extension. And so as we try to work out ways to figure out governance on the continent of Africa, we're also working on the trade, finance, and economic aspects as well. So thank you guys.